Mr. Brown, stand before this court. The judge's voice sliced through the heavy silence like a blade, commanding obedience and signaling the beginning of a battle that would decide far more than just legal rights. It would decide the very soul of a broken family. Cameras clicked furiously from the press bench, capturing every flicker of emotion that crossed Kody Brown's face. He rose slowly, his movements deliberate, as if buying time, as if by standing too quickly he might topple under the weight of what was coming. His once confident eyes darted nervously across the courtroom, landing briefly on Christine and Janelle, who sat side by side at the plaintiff's table, united in a way he had never imagined they could be. Their eyes were cold, hardened, not by hatred but by betrayal, the kind that festers over years of promises broken, children neglected, and trust manipulated until nothing remains but resentment. The courtroom itself buzzed with quiet anticipation. Reporters from every major network filled the gallery, their pens poised to document every word, every outburst, every tear. Former fans who had once idolized the Brown family's unconventional life sat shoulder to shoulder with critics who had long predicted this collapse. What had once been sold as a harmonious plural marriage had disintegrated into a storm of lawsuits, accusations, and public humiliation. But today was not about television ratings or fan debates. Today was about justice, and the lives of the children caught in the crossfire of their parents' imploding world. Kody's attorney whispered something to him, a final reminder of the strategy they had carefully built, a warning to stay composed. But composure was not something Kody had mastered lately. The months leading up to this trial had stripped him of much of the confidence and charisma that once defined him. Once hailed as the patriarch who could balance 4 wives and 18 children, he now stood accused of neglect, emotional manipulation, and deliberate parental alienation. The charges were not criminal, but their impact could change his life forever. Christine and Janelle weren't suing for money. They were suing for custody, the right to protect their children from a man they claimed had used them as pawns in his power games. Christine glanced toward Kody, but did not hold his gaze. There was no softness left there. No hint of the woman who once fought to keep the family together. The pain of their history lingered in her eyes. The endless arguments, the cold silences, the feeling of invisibility as Kody's attention shifted elsewhere. But beneath the sadness was something stronger. Resolve. She had not endured years of emotional warfare only to surrender now. Beside her, Janelle exuded the same quiet strength. She had always been the calm in the chaos, the peacemaker, but even she had reached her breaking point. Their united presence sent a clear message. They were no longer rivals, no longer wives competing for scraps of affection. They were allies, bound together by their determination to shield their children from further harm. Kody tried to maintain a stoic expression, but inside his thoughts raced. He had faced cameras and critics before, but this was different. This was his children's future. He had always believed he was a good father. Strict, yes, but loving. He told himself that Christine and Janelle were exaggerating, twisting his actions into something malicious. Yet deep down, a part of him knew that some of their accusations were not far from the truth. There had been moments, too many moments, when he had chosen pride over presence, when his anger at their defiance had outweighed his responsibility as a father. The judge's voice interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Mr. Brown, you stand before this court accused of actions that have caused significant emotional harm to your children and undermined their relationship with their mothers. This case is not about the dissolution of marriage. It is about custody, stability, and the best interests of the minors involved. The words were measured but heavy, and each one landed on Kody like a blow. The air in the courtroom seemed to thicken as the opening minutes stretched on. Observers shifted in their seats, sensing the gravity of the moment. Christine clasped her hands tightly together, her knuckles white, while Janelle stared straight ahead, her jaw set. Both women knew that the next few weeks would be grueling. Every text, every email, every memory dissected under the harsh light of legal scrutiny. They would have to relive the pain, the manipulation, the neglect. But they were ready. For their children, they would endure anything. Kody's attorney rose to speak, his voice polished and calm. Your Honor, my client is a devoted father who has always acted in what he believed to be the best interests of his children. The accusations you will hear today are distortions, attempts to rewrite history through the lens of bitterness and regret. Christine's lawyer scoffed quietly but said nothing. The judge nodded, signaling for the proceedings to continue. As testimony began, Kody's mind wandered again, this time to the faces of his children, some grown and distant, others still young and confused. He wondered how they would remember this chapter of their lives. Would they see him as the villain their mothers painted him to be, or as a flawed man trying to hold a family together against impossible odds? The truth, he feared, might be somewhere in between. The first witness was called, a family therapist who had worked with the Browns during the height of their turmoil. Her words were clinical but devastating. The children exhibited signs of abandonment trauma. She testified. Their father's inconsistent presence and conditional affection created long-term emotional instability. Kody stared at the table in front of him, unable to meet anyone's gaze. By the time the court adjourned for the day, the foundation of his defense had already begun to crack. Christine and Janelle walked out together, surrounded by supporters and flashing cameras, while Kody lingered behind, his attorney speaking rapidly into his ear. The trial had barely begun, yet the weight of what lay ahead pressed down on him like a mountain. This was no longer about pride or public image. This was about whether he would remain a father in more than just name. As the courtroom emptied and the echoes of footsteps faded, Kody sat alone on the wooden bench, staring at the judge's empty seat. He remembered the words that had started it all. Stand before this court. And now standing was the hardest thing he had ever done. The empire he built was gone. The family he once controlled now controlled his fate. And the children he claimed to love more than anything were about to testify to a truth he might not be ready to face. The gavel had fallen, and nothing in Kody Brown's world would ever be the same again. Christine's attorney rose from his seat with a deliberate calm, adjusting his glasses before addressing the court. The air was tense, every eye locked on him as he stepped into the center of the courtroom, facing the jury. His voice, steady and sharp, cut through the silence like a blade. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we stand here today not because of a marriage that ended, but because of promises broken, trust betrayed, and children who have suffered deeply as a result. My clients, Christine and Janelle Brown, are not seeking vengeance. They are seeking protection, stability and justice for the children who were caught in the crossfire of Kody Brown's reckless choices. Cameras clicked wildly from the gallery, and even Kody shifted uncomfortably in his chair. It was clear from the very first sentence. This was not going to be an easy fight. The attorney took a few slow steps, pacing before the jury as he continued. For years, Kody Brown presented himself as the loving father of a large, unconventional family. To the outside world, he was the man who built a household on faith and commitment. But behind the cameras, behind the carefully edited scenes, was a different story. One of manipulation, abandonment, and emotional cruelty. He turned suddenly, pointing toward Kody without warning. This man, the defendant, did not simply fail to be present as a father. He weaponized his presence. He used it to punish, to control, and to silence. And when my clients refused to obey his demands, he turned his back on his children. A quiet murmur rippled through the courtroom. Kody's lawyer rose. Objection, Your Honor. Inflammatory language. The judge raised a hand, but did not immediately interrupt. Sustained in part, counsel remained factual. Christine's attorney nodded. Of course, Your Honor. The facts speak louder than any rhetoric could. He approached the evidence table and lifted a stack of printed messages. These are text messages sent by Mr. Brown to his own children. In them you will read how he refused to visit unless they showed proper respect. You will see how he told them their mothers were turning them weak. And you will see, most painfully, how he cut off financial support the moment they stopped obeying his authority. Christine's heart pounded in her chest as she listened. She had lived through those messages, read them over and over until the words burned into her memory. But hearing them read aloud in a courtroom, in front of strangers and cameras, felt like reopening a wound she had tried desperately to heal. She glanced at Janelle, who squeezed her hand briefly. They were in this together now, and there was no turning back. The attorney continued, his voice softening as he shifted his focus. Kody Brown dedicated nearly 3 decades of her life to this family. She raised children, supported Kody's ambitions, and sacrificed her own dreams to build a home for them all. Janelle Brown did the same, balancing work, motherhood, and the impossible task of keeping peace in a house ruled by one man's ego. And how were they repaid? With silence. With neglect. With a father who disappeared from birthdays and graduations. With a husband who weaponized love and turned his back on those who needed him most. Kody clenched his jaw tightly, trying not to react. But the attorney's words hit hard, because they were painfully close to the truth. He remembered the missed events, the angry messages, the moments when pride mattered more than presence. His lawyer leaned over and whispered, "Stay calm, don't let them bait you." But Kody's hands were already gripping the edge of the defense table, knuckles white. Then the attorney paused, his eyes scanning the jury with deliberate slowness. This case is not about punishing Mr. Brown for being imperfect. No parent is perfect. It is about holding him accountable for choices that were deliberate and damaging. Choices that left children feeling unloved, unwanted, and unsafe. And it is about ensuring that he can no longer use those children as leverage in his personal battles. The judge shifted slightly in her seat, watching Kody's reaction closely. The gallery was dead silent now. No scribbling pens, no camera clicks, just the weight of every word settling over the room like dust. Kody's attorney took a final step toward the bench. "We will present evidence. Messages, financial records, testimony, that paints a clear and undeniable picture. We will show you that Kody Brown did not simply fail as a husband. He failed as a father. And we will ask you to give these children what he has repeatedly denied them: consistency, compassion, and a home free from manipulation." Then with a subtle but powerful gesture, he gestured toward Kody. "She will testify to the countless nights she stayed awake, comforting children who cried for a father who never came. Janelle will tell you about the months she spent struggling to pay for their needs after Kody cut them off. And the children themselves, some of whom you will hear from directly, will tell you how it feels to be made to choose between their mothers and their father." The final blow came as the attorney turned back to face Kody. "Mr. Brown will claim he loves his children. And perhaps he does. In his own way. But love is not measured by words. It is measured by actions. And the actions of this man, time and time again, have shown that his love is conditional. And conditional love has no place in the life of a child." As he returned to his seat, the courtroom remained heavy with tension. Kody's lawyer rose, buttoning his suit jacket, ready to deliver a fiery rebuttal. But the first impression had been made, and it was devastating. The jury had seen the image of a father who had not just stumbled but deliberately chosen a path of control and abandonment. Kody swallowed hard, staring straight ahead as flashes from photographers illuminated the courtroom. His reputation, his legacy, his very identity as a father was now on trial. And in that moment, as Kody's attorney sat back down with quiet confidence, Kody realized something he had never admitted even to himself. This wasn't going to be a fight he could charm his way out of. This time, the truth was coming for him, and it was stronger than any defense he could build. Kody rose slowly from her seat as her attorney called her to the witness stand. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Cameras zoomed in, reporters scribbled notes, and jurors leaned forward slightly, as if they already sensed the weight of what she was about to say. Kody walked steadily, but inside, her heart pounded. She had been strong for years. Strong for her kids, strong for herself. But now, under oath, and under the gaze of the man who had broken her heart, the truth she had carried alone for so long was finally about to be spoken aloud. The bailiff held out the Bible, and Kody placed her hand on it, swearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. She took a deep breath, and adjusted the microphone before her. Her attorney offered a reassuring nod and stepped aside. "Mrs. Brown," he began gently, Can you tell the court in your own words why you are here today? Christine glanced briefly toward Kody, the man she had once loved so deeply, the father of her children, the man she had built decades of her life around, and then looked back at the jury. I'm here, she said softly, because I believe my children deserve better than what they've been given. I'm here because the person they should have been able to rely on most, their father, chose control over care, power over presence, and pride over parenting. A hush fell over the room. Christine's words weren't loud, but they were laced with raw pain. She continued, her voice steadier now. When I first married Kody, I believed in him completely. We built a family together. A big, messy, beautiful family. And for years, I tried to make it work. I believed every sacrifice was worth it. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about family. It started being about control. Everything, where we lived, how we raised the children, even how we spoke, had to align with what he wanted. And if it didn't, we were punished. Not with violence, but with silence. With distance, with neglect. Her attorney nodded. Can you give the court an example of what you mean by neglect? Christine took a deep breath. There were birthdays he didn't show up for. School events he promised he'd attend, but never did. Holidays where he spent time with one set of children and ignored the others. It wasn't just about being busy. It was deliberate. If a child spoke up or questioned him, they were cut off. If I disagreed with him, he stopped coming around. It wasn't parenting, it was punishment. The attorney presented a series of printed text messages and emails on a screen for the jury. Do you recognize these? Yes, Christine said quietly. Those are from Kody. The jury read the messages. If they want my time, they'll have to show me respect. You're making them weak with your coddling. I'm not coming until they learn how to behave. Each word echoed through the courtroom, painting a chilling picture of a father who treated love as something to be earned rather than given. Christine's attorney stepped closer. How did this behavior affect your children? Christine swallowed hard, her eyes welling with tears. It broke them. My daughter would cry at night, asking why her dad didn't love her anymore. My son stopped calling him altogether because he couldn't handle the rejection. They blamed themselves. They thought they weren't good enough, when the truth was they were children. Just children. Who needed their father. Kody shifted uncomfortably at the defense table, staring at his hands. He wanted to object, to shout that it wasn't true, that he loved his kids more than anything. But even he knew that love wasn't something you said. It was something you showed. And deep down, he knew he hadn't always shown it. Christine's tone hardened as she continued. It wasn't just about absence. It was about control. He used his time and attention as a weapon. If we obeyed, he rewarded us with affection. If we didn't, he disappeared. And the children learned that love had conditions. That they had to earn their father's approval. That's not parenting. That's manipulation. The attorney nodded and shifted the questioning. What happened when you decided to leave the marriage? Christine exhaled slowly. When I told Kody I was leaving, everything changed. He turned the children against me. He told them I was abandoning the family, that I was selfish, that I was breaking God's will. It was devastating. I wasn't leaving them. I was trying to save them. I wanted them to have stability, to grow up without the emotional games. But he couldn't let go of control. Even then, the jury watched her closely, their expressions shifting from curiosity to sympathy. This wasn't a bitter ex-wife seeking revenge. This was a mother trying to protect her children from a lifetime of emotional scars. Christine's attorney presented a series of school attendance records, therapy notes, and testimony statements from counselors who had worked with the children. Each piece of evidence added weight to her words. The pattern was undeniable. Withdrawal, anxiety, abandonment issues, all linked back to inconsistent contact and conditional affection from their father. The cross-examination from Kody's lawyer was sharp but cautious. Mrs. Brown, isn't it true that you sometimes spoke negatively about Mr. Brown in front of the children? Christine didn't hesitate. I told them the truth. I told them that their father loved them, but that sometimes adults make choices that hurt. I never lied to them. I never poisoned them against him. He did that himself with his actions. The lawyer tried again. And isn't it possible that the children's distance from their father is due at least in part to your influence? Christine's reply was calm and unwavering. If a child runs from a flame, it's not because someone told them fire is dangerous. It's because they felt the burn themselves. The courtroom went silent again. Even the judge seemed to pause, letting the power of her words linger in the air. Christine looked toward the jury one last time. I'm not asking this court to erase their father from their lives. I'm asking you to protect them from the harm he keeps causing. If he wants to be a father, he needs to earn that role, not by demanding respect, but by showing up, consistently, lovingly, unconditionally. When Christine stepped down from the stand, there was no doubt her testimony had struck a deep chord. The jurors exchanged glances. Reporters whispered to each other, and Kody, for perhaps the first time, felt the heavy weight of accountability pressing down on him. The story wasn't just hers anymore. It was theirs. And it was only beginning. Janelle rose from her seat with a quiet steadiness, a calm that belied the storm of emotions swirling inside her. She had spent years holding her family together, balancing finances, managing chaos, absorbing blows meant to tear them apart. And now, finally, it was her turn to speak. The bailiff guided her to the stand, and she placed her hand on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth. As she adjusted the microphone, the courtroom's hum dimmed into silence. Everyone knew Janelle was the practical one, the peacemaker, the rock who rarely spoke out. If she was here, testifying against Kody, then things had gone far deeper than anyone had imagined. Her attorney approached slowly, mindful of the weight of the moment. Mrs. Brown, he began gently, you've always been known as the steady presence in this family. Can you tell the court why you decided to join this lawsuit? Janelle took a deep breath and looked directly at the jury. Because I've watched my children suffer, she said. Because I've watched them question their worth, doubt their value, and cry themselves to sleep, wondering why their father didn't want them. I joined this lawsuit because I am done making excuses for behavior that's been breaking their hearts for years. The words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. Janelle had always been composed, the one who smoothed over conflicts and diffused explosive arguments. But today there was no diplomacy. There was only truth. Can you explain what you mean by that? The attorney asked. Janelle nodded, folding her hands in her lap. For years I believed that if I just tried harder, if I kept the peace, followed the rules, stayed quiet, things would get better, but they never did. Kody's version of fatherhood wasn't about love or guidance. It was about control. It was about loyalty. And loyalty to him meant silence. If we questioned his decisions, if the kids asked too many questions, if we didn't align perfectly with what he wanted, we were punished. Not with violence, but with withdrawal. He stopped showing up. The attorney handed her a folder of printed messages and emails. Do you recognize these? Yes, she replied, glancing over them. These are messages from Kody to me. The jury read the words projected on the screen. You're undermining my authority. If they can't respect me, I won't be involved. I don't have time for ungrateful children. Each message revealed a man more concerned with control than connection. Janelle's voice softened, but the pain beneath it was unmistakable. He didn't just withdraw emotionally. He withdrew financially. There were months when I had to stretch every penny just to pay for groceries and school fees because Kody redirected family money into accounts only he controlled. And when I asked him why, he told me I needed to learn how to manage without him. He said it was a test of independence. But it wasn't a test. It was punishment for disagreeing with him. The attorney took a step closer. How did that affect your children? It broke their trust, she answered without hesitation. My kids stopped believing their father would be there when they needed him. They stopped asking for his help, stopped calling, stopped trying. My son once told me, it hurts less to pretend he's not there than to keep hoping he'll show up. Imagine hearing that from your child, that pretending their father doesn't exist is easier than being disappointed again and again. Kody shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. He wanted to shout that it wasn't true, that he'd done his best, that the situation was more complicated. But every word Janelle spoke carried the ring of undeniable truth, and the jury could feel it. The attorney continued. Mrs. Brown, Did Kody ever express regret for his absence or behavior? Janelle's expression hardened. Not once. If anything, he blamed us. He told me I was too soft. He said the kids were spoiled because I let them express their feelings. He called Christine emotional and accused her of turning them against him. In his mind, he was never the problem. We were. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence as Janelle's words painted a picture of years spent trying to hold together a family that one man seemed determined to tear apart. The attorney asked, "Did you ever confront him directly about the impact his actions were having?" "Yes," she said firmly. "Many times. And every time he turned it back on me. He said I was overreacting. He said I was trying to make him feel guilty. He said if the kids didn't like how things were, they needed to grow up and deal with it." That's when I realized he wasn't going to change. He wasn't going to step up and be the father they needed. And that's when I knew I had to fight for them. Even if it meant fighting against him. The attorney let her words settle before asking one final question. "What do you hope this court will do?" Janelle looked directly at the judge. "I hope this court will see that love isn't about control. That parenting isn't about power. It's about showing up. Even when it's inconvenient. Even when it's hard. I hope this court will give my children the chance to grow up without the fear that love can be taken away if they make a mistake. And I hope one day Kody understands that he didn't lose us because we stopped loving him. He lost us because he stopped trying." The courtroom was utterly still. Even those who had arrived skeptical of Christine and Janelle's claims now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The image of Kody Brown, once the proud patriarch of a large, unconventional family, was crumbling under the weight of testimony from the women who knew him best. As Janelle stepped down from the stand, she passed Christine, who reached out and squeezed her hand. It was a small, silent gesture, but it spoke volumes. They were no longer two women who had once shared a husband. They were two mothers united in a fight for their children's future. And no matter how powerful Kody once believed himself to be, nothing could stand against that. Kody stared ahead, jaw tight, refusing to meet their eyes. The evidence was mounting, the testimonies devastating, and the court's perception shifting rapidly against him. The walls of control he had spent decades building were beginning to collapse, and for the first time he understood just how much he stood to lose. This wasn't just a custody battle anymore. This was a reckoning. Kody rose from his seat slowly, deliberately, as if trying to summon the authority that once made people listen without question. The courtroom's energy shifted. The man who had been painted as a manipulative, absent father was now stepping forward to tell his side. Cameras flashed, reporters scrambled to capture his every movement, and jurors leaned forward, ready to hear from the person at the center of it all. He adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and took his place on the witness stand. For a moment, he remained silent, scanning the faces before him. Christine's cold, unwavering stare, Janelle's quiet defiance, the judge's impassive gaze. This was his chance to fight back, and he intended to use it. "Mr. Brown," his attorney began gently, "can you explain to the court in your own words why you believe these accusations against you are unfair?" Kody exhaled heavily and leaned forward toward the microphone. "Because they're only telling half the story," he said, his voice low but firm. "I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes, but I'm not the monster they're trying to make me out to be. Everything I've ever done, every decision, every difficult choice, was for my family. I loved them. I still love them." He paused, as if expecting the room to soften, but it remained cold and unyielding. He continued anyway, his voice rising slightly with each sentence. "Christine and Janelle want you to believe I abandoned my children. But the truth is, they left me. They decided they no longer wanted the life we built. They decided they were done with plural marriage, done with our faith, done with everything we stood for. And when they left, they poisoned my children against me. They told them I didn't care, that I was selfish, that I was the reason their family was falling apart. But I was trying. I was fighting to hold us together." Christine's attorney objected to the language, but the judge allowed him to continue. Kody gripped the sides of the witness stand, the mask of calm beginning to crack. "They talk about birthdays I missed, and events I didn't attend, but they don't tell you the part where they refused to let me be involved. They pushed me away. They told me I wasn't welcome. They made decisions without me, and then blamed me for not being there. How can a father show up when every door is slammed in his face? The attorney guided him gently. Can you describe your relationship with your children from your perspective? Kody nodded, his expression softening slightly. I love my kids more than anything in this world. I worked hard to provide for them, to build a life for them. Do you think I wanted to miss those moments? Do you think it didn't kill me inside every time I couldn't see them? But it's hard to be a father when your children are being taught that you're the enemy. Every visit turned into an interrogation. Every phone call ended with tears or anger. And after a while they stopped answering. They stopped calling. I was painted as a villain in my own family. He turned toward Christine and Janelle, his voice trembling now. I know I wasn't perfect. I was strict. I set boundaries. Maybe I said things I shouldn't have. But I never stopped loving them. I never stopped trying. I was there when they were sick, when they needed advice, when they called in the middle of the night. They talk about my absence, but what about the times I was there? Do those moments mean nothing? The courtroom remained still, the tension growing thicker with each passing second. Janelle's attorney rose for cross-examination. Mr. Brown, he began, his tone sharp, are you suggesting that your children, some of them as young as 8 at the time, deliberately pushed you away? Kody hesitated. I'm saying they were influenced. Children are impressionable. They hear one side over and over, and they start to believe it. And when your daughter testified that she cried for you and you never came, was that her imagination? The attorney pressed. Kody's jaw tightened. I didn't come because I wasn't welcome. Or because you were angry. I was hurt. Kody snapped. I was hurt, and I didn't know how to fix it. The attorney didn't back down. You claim you were trying to hold the family together. Yet we have evidence, messages, financial records, showing you withheld money and visitation when things didn't go your way. Is that your idea of trying? Kody shifted uncomfortably. I needed boundaries. I wasn't going to be manipulated either. So instead, the attorney said, stepping closer, you manipulated them. You made your love conditional. If they did what you wanted, you were present. If they didn't, you disappeared. Isn't that true? Kody's silence spoke louder than any denial could. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, realizing that any answer would only dig the hole deeper. The attorney delivered one final blow. Mr. Brown, isn't it true that this custody case isn't about your children at all? It's about control, about the fact that for the first time you don't have it? Kody's eyes narrowed, anger flashing across his face. No, he said firmly. This is about a father who loves his children and is tired of being shut out of their lives. I'm not the villain here. I'm a dad who's been lied about, betrayed, and turned into a stranger in his own family. But as he said the words, the courtroom could feel the shift, a subtle but undeniable sense that his defense wasn't landing the way he hoped. The jury exchanged glances, and even the judge's expression betrayed a trace of skepticism. Kody's words were passionate, but they were also evasive, defensive, and laced with bitterness. As he stepped down from the witness stand, he glanced at Christine and Janelle again. Their expressions didn't change. They had heard his excuses before. They had lived them. And now, in this courtroom, the truth was no longer confined to their memories. It was public record. Kody returned to his seat, his heart pounding. He had told his side, but deep down, he knew it might not be enough. The evidence against him was mounting. The testimony was damning. And for the first time in his life, the man who once controlled every narrative was watching the story slip out of his hands. The courtroom no longer saw the confident patriarch he once was. They saw a desperate man fighting to hold on to a family he had already lost. The courtroom buzzed with a different kind of tension, as Christine's attorney rose once again, holding a thick stack of printed documents. Everyone knew what was coming. The part of the trial that could make or break the entire case. This was the moment when claims would turn into proof, when memories would become evidence. Kody shifted in his seat, his jaw clenched tightly, a bead of sweat forming at his temple. He had expected testimonies, emotional pleas, and painful accusations. But what was about to be presented would leave little room for interpretation. Your Honor, Christine's attorney said firmly, approaching the bench with measured steps. We are now presenting Exhibits 21 through 54, a comprehensive record of Mr. Brown's written communications with his children, his former wives, and third parties over the last 5 years. He handed the files to the bailiff, who distributed them to the judge, jury, and defense. The room was so silent you could hear the shuffling of paper. Christine kept her gaze fixed on Kody as the attorney began. These messages, emails, and recorded voicemails are not opinions. They are Mr. Brown's own words. Words that paint a clear and undeniable picture of emotional manipulation, conditional affection, and intentional alienation of his children. He clicked a remote, and the first message appeared on the large screen for the courtroom to read. If they want my time, they'll have to learn respect. The attorney paused. This message was sent to Christine regarding their 14-year-old daughter, who had asked why her father had stopped attending her choir practices. A collective murmur rippled through the courtroom. Another message flashed across the screen. I'm not coming over if they're going to question me. You need to remember who's in charge. Christine stared down at her hands, fighting back tears. These were the messages she had read late at night, wondering how she would explain them to her children, how she could convince them it wasn't their fault. Here's another, the attorney continued, scrolling. I don't owe them anything if they're not going to listen. The words struck like hammers. The jury shifted in their seats. Even the judge's brow furrowed slightly. These weren't the words of a father struggling to connect. They were the words of a man who believed love was a bargaining chip. The attorney's voice grew more intense as he paced before the jury. This isn't discipline, this isn't tough love. This is control. This is punishment disguised as parenting. And it didn't stop with words. He flipped to another piece of evidence. An email exchange between Kody and a financial advisor. In this email he explained, Mr. Brown instructs his advisor to reroute funds from the family account into a private one, stating, and I quote, they'll learn appreciation when the money stops flowing. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Janelle closed her eyes, reliving the months she had struggled to keep up with bills, unaware that Kody had deliberately cut off support to prove a point. The defense lawyer leapt to his feet. Objection, Your Honor, this is taken out of context. The judge glanced at the email, then back at the attorney. Overruled. The jury will decide the context. The attorney nodded and continued. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this was not a man trying to co-parent. This was a man using money and attention as weapons, punishing his family for independence, punishing his children for having their own thoughts. But the most damaging evidence was still to come. We now turn to the recorded voicemails. Your Honor. A hush fell over the courtroom as the first audio clip played through the speakers. Kody's voice filled the room, sharp and cold. If they're going to treat me like a stranger, then they'll get one. Don't call me when they need something. I'm done being used. Another voicemail followed. They're weak because of you. You coddle them. I won't be part of raising kids who don't respect their father. Christine closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Janelle looked away, unable to watch Kody's face as his own words sealed his image in front of the jury. The attorney stepped closer to the jury box. I want you to imagine being 14 years old, and hearing that from your father. Imagine being 10, and realizing that love is something you have to earn. That is the environment these children were forced to grow up in. And that is why we are here. Because no child deserves to believe they are unworthy of love. The defense scrambled to recover, suggesting that the messages were taken during emotional moments and shouldn't define Kody's character. But the damage was done. The courtroom had seen a side of him that no amount of charm or excuses could erase. Then Christine's attorney revealed one final piece of evidence. A series of emails sent to mutual acquaintances and family friends. In them, Kody referred to Christine and Janelle as bitter, unstable, and manipulative, urging others to choose sides and limit contact. One particularly damaging line read, if they're not with me, they're against me. And that includes the kids. The courtroom gasped again, louder this time. The phrase carried the chilling undertone of a man drawing battle lines, even if it meant isolating his own children. When the attorney finally rested his case, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted entirely. The image of Kody Brown as a misunderstood father, fighting for his children, had been replaced by a portrait of a man whose actions, documented and deliberate, spoke volumes louder than his words ever could. Kody sat motionless, staring at the table, his face pale. His attorney whispered urgently in his ear, but he didn't seem to hear. Every carefully crafted defense strategy, every attempt to shift blame, was unraveling under the weight of hard evidence. Christine reached for Janelle's hand, and they shared a brief tearful glance. For years they had carried this truth alone, dismissed as bitter ex-wives, or overreacting mothers. But now, in a courtroom filled with strangers, the truth was undeniable, and it was no longer just their word against his. The judge called for a recess, and the bailiff announced a short break. As people stood and stretched, the press surged toward the doors, eager to relay what they had just witnessed. Christine stayed seated, clutching a tissue, while Kody remained frozen in place, staring blankly ahead. For the first time in his life, the man who had always controlled the narrative was watching it slip completely out of his hands. And this time, it wasn't gossip or rumors. It was evidence. And evidence, unlike excuses, didn't lie. The courtroom was thick with tension when the judge returned from recess. Everyone knew the next stage of the trial would be the most emotional yet. The voices of the people at the heart of this case, not the lawyers, not the parents, but the children themselves. As the bailiff announced the first witness, a hush fell over the room, so complete that even the clicking of cameras ceased. One by one, the children who had grown up in the shadow of Kody Brown's fractured family were about to speak, not as evidence, but as living proof of the damage that had been done. The door opened slowly, and a teenage girl stepped in, her hands trembling as she made her way to the witness stand. She was 16 now, but the weight of her experiences made her seem older. Christine watched her daughter take the oath, her heart breaking and swelling at the same time, proud of her courage, devastated that she even had to be here. Kody's eyes followed her too, his expression unreadable, a mixture of regret, fear, and something darker, guilt he wasn't ready to admit. "Please state your name for the record," Christine's attorney said softly. The girl spoke, her voice small but steady. "I'm Aurora Brown." "Thank you, Aurora," the attorney continued gently. "I know this isn't easy. Can you tell the court how your relationship with your father has been over the last few years?" Aurora's eyes darted toward Kody for a moment, then back to the attorney. "It's been hard. I used to be really close to my dad. He was fun, and he always made me feel special. But after Mom left, everything changed. He stopped calling as much. He missed my birthday. He told me I was choosing sides just because I wanted to spend time with Mom. I didn't understand. I was just a kid." The courtroom was silent, the weight of her words pressing down on everyone present. "Can you describe how that made you feel?" the attorney asked. Aurora hesitated, her eyes welling with tears. "It made me feel like I wasn't enough. Like no matter what I did, I couldn't make him love me again. I tried to call him. I texted. Sometimes he wouldn't answer. Sometimes he'd reply days later and tell me he was busy. It felt like I was the problem, like something was wrong with me." Christine lowered her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. Even Kody's face softened, his usual stubborn expression giving way to something raw and painful. He wanted to stand up, to say he was sorry, but all he could do was listen as the truth unfolded. Aurora continued, her voice shaking. "One time I asked him why he didn't come to my choir concert. He said he didn't feel welcome because Mom would be there. But it wasn't about her. It was about me. And he still didn't come." The attorney nodded. "Aurora, how would you describe your relationship with your father now?" She took a deep breath. "I don't know if I have one anymore. I love him. I always will. But I don't trust him. And I don't know if I ever will again." The silence that followed was deafening. Jurors exchanged glances, some of them visibly moved. Reporters scribbled furiously, capturing every word. The next witness was Janelle's son, now 18. And his testimony carried a different kind of pain, not sadness but anger. "I stopped calling him when I was 15, he said bluntly. "I got tired of the excuses. I got tired of feeling like a chore. Every time I reached out, he made it about him, about his feelings, his problems, his rules. It was never about us, never about how we felt." The attorney asked him what his last conversation with his father was like. The boy laughed bitterly. "He told me I needed to man up and stop being emotional. I told him I didn't want to talk anymore. And I haven't." Kody's lawyer tried to soften the blow during cross-examination. Would you say that your mother influenced your feelings toward your father? No. The boy shot back. He did that all by himself. The courtroom murmured as the answer hit like a hammer. Kody's lawyer shifted uneasily, but moved on, knowing there was no recovery from that. The third testimony came from a younger child, just 11 years old, who had to testify via video link from another room. The judge had deemed it too emotionally risky for her to face her father directly. Even through the screen, her innocence and confusion tore through the courtroom like a blade. "I don't know why Daddy doesn't come over," she said softly. "I asked if I could see him, and he said he was busy. He's always busy, but he goes to see Robyn's kids." Christine bit her lip, her heart aching. The attorney asked gently, "How does that make you feel?" The little girl hesitated. "It makes me feel like he doesn't like me anymore." Even the judge, who had remained composed throughout the trial, seemed visibly affected by the child's words. Kody stared down at the table, his eyes glistening. He couldn't look at the screen. He couldn't look at anyone. For all his excuses, all his justifications, there was no defense against the raw honesty of a child's pain. Christine's attorney concluded the children's testimonies with a simple statement: "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is not about bitterness or anger. This is about children who have been made to feel unworthy of a father's love. Children who should never have had to question whether they mattered." The judge called for a short recess, but no one in the courtroom moved right away. The air was heavy. Heavier than it had been at any point so far. Kody remained seated, frozen, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. He had just heard the truth from the only people whose opinions truly mattered, and it was devastating. As Christine and Janelle wrapped their arms around their children outside the courtroom, Kody sat alone at the defense table, staring at the empty witness stand where his daughter had just spoken. For the first time in years, the reality of his choices wasn't just being thrown at him by ex-wives or critics. It was being spoken by the very voices he claimed to love most. And no matter what he said next, those words would echo in his mind forever. This wasn't just a custody battle anymore. This was a reckoning of the past. And for Kody Brown, the harshest judgment wasn't coming from the court. It was coming from his own children. The courtroom was still heavy from the children's testimony when the bailiff called the next witness. All eyes turned toward the door as Robyn Brown, Kody's only remaining wife, entered, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. If Christine and Janelle's testimonies had shaken the court, Robyn's could detonate it. Once considered Kody's most loyal ally, Robyn had stood by him through every scandal and separation. But today, under oath, loyalty would be tested against truth. And everyone knew the outcome could change the trajectory of the case entirely. Robyn walked to the stand slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she was sworn in. She sat, adjusting the microphone nervously, and glanced toward Kody. Their eyes met briefly, his full of silent pleading, hers clouded with hesitation. She had promised herself she would tell the truth. But telling the truth meant exposing the man she loved. Christine's attorney stepped forward. "Mrs. Brown, you have been in a relationship with Mr. Brown for more than a decade. Would you describe your marriage as close?" "Yes," she said softly. "We've always had a strong bond. Kody has been my partner and my best friend. We built a life together." "And have you witnessed his relationship with his other children?" the attorney asked. Robyn hesitated. "Yes, I have." "Would you say he has been a consistent father to them?" Silence. Robyn's eyes darted toward Kody again. His jaw was tight, his hands clasped together on the table. She took a deep breath. "No, not always." The room stirred with murmurs. It was the first time anyone had heard Robyn admit even a hint of criticism toward Kody. The attorney pressed gently. "Can you explain what you mean by that?" "He loves his children," Robyn said quickly, as if trying to soften the blow. "I know he does, but sometimes he lets his anger get in the way. If he feels disrespected, he pulls back. If he thinks someone has betrayed him, he stops trying. There were times when he refused to visit, because he was upset. Times when he said he wouldn't go unless they apologized." Christine looked down at the table, tears welling in her eyes. Janelle stared straight ahead. Her jaw clenched. These were the truths they had been shouting for years, now finally spoken by the one person Kody trusted most. Mrs. Brown, the attorney continued. Can you recall any instances when Mr. Brown refused to see his children because of their relationship with their mothers? Robyn's hands twisted in her lap. Yes, there were several times. He said he didn't want to reward bad behavior. He thought visiting them when they were being disrespectful would teach them that they could treat him however they wanted. And did you agree with that? Robyn hesitated, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. No, I told him he should still go, that they needed him, but he wouldn't listen. The courtroom was utterly still. Even Kody's defense attorney seemed unsure of how to proceed. Robyn's words were not just testimony. They were confirmation from inside his own home that everything Christine and Janelle had claimed was true. The questioning continued. Mrs. Brown, would you say Mr. Brown treated all his children equally? Her answer came slower this time. No, not really. Can you elaborate? He spent more time with my children. Robyn admitted. They live with us full time, so it was easier. But sometimes it felt like he preferred being around them because it was less complicated. He didn't have to deal with arguments or tension. It was peaceful. And I think he avoided the others because it reminded him of the conflict. The jury shifted uneasily. What had once been dismissed as speculation was now undeniable. Kody had chosen comfort over responsibility, distance over effort. The attorney leaned in slightly. Mrs. Brown, would you say Mr. Brown was ever motivated by control in his interactions with his family? Robyn froze, clearly torn. I think control was part of it, she admitted. Finally, he likes things a certain way. And when they're not that way, he gets frustrated. He wants people to follow his lead. When they don't, he pulls away. Did he ever express anger toward Christine or Janelle for leaving? Yes, Robyn whispered. He was furious. He said they ruined the family. He said they were selfish. He said if they hadn't left, none of this would be happening. Christine's attorney let the silence linger before speaking again. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. No further questions. When Kody's attorney rose for cross-examination, his tone was tense, almost desperate. Mrs. Brown, despite your statements, would you agree that Mr. Brown loves his children deeply? Yes, Robyn said quickly. I believe he does. And would you agree that many of his actions, even the ones you don't approve of, came from a place of pain? Yes, I think so. The attorney tried to redirect the narrative, painting Kody as a flawed man overwhelmed by heartbreak and betrayal. But the damage was already done. Robyn's testimony, measured, reluctant, but undeniably honest, had given the plaintiff's case more credibility than any lawyer ever could. When she stepped down from the witness stand, Robyn looked shaken. As she passed Kody, she hesitated, perhaps waiting for a reassuring glance, a nod, any sign that he understood why she had said what she did. But Kody stared straight ahead, his expression hard and cold. The betrayal cut deep, not just because she had spoken against him, but because her words had stripped away the last layer of defense he had left, the illusion that at least one person still believed his version of events. The courtroom felt different now, heavier, more certain. Christine and Janelle exchanged a look that said everything. The truth was no longer theirs alone. It was coming from inside Kody's own home, from the person who knew him best. And if even Robyn couldn't defend his actions without revealing the cracks, then his credibility with the jury had all but disintegrated. Kody sat back in his chair, eyes fixed on the floor, as the judge called for a brief recess. He didn't speak. He didn't move. The silence around him was suffocating. The family he had once controlled with authority and confidence was now united, not by loyalty, but by shared pain. And for the first time, Kody Brown faced a terrifying reality. He was no longer just fighting for custody. He was fighting against the consequences of his own choices, laid bare for the entire world to see. The next day of the trial began with an electric tension that even the most seasoned reporters could feel. The gallery was packed. Journalists, legal analysts, and former fans of the Brown family sat shoulder to shoulder, eager to witness what had been teased as the most explosive day yet. The bailiff called the court to order, and when Christine's attorney rose, there was a sharp edge in his voice that hadn't been there before. Everyone could sense that today wasn't going to be about emotions or testimony. It was going to be about cold hard numbers. And those numbers could destroy Kody Brown's already crumbling defense. Your Honor, Christine's attorney began. We are now entering into evidence. Exhibits 55 through 87, bank records, tax filings, property deeds, and financial transfers tied directly to Mr. Brown over the past 7 years. He gestured to a cart piled high with folders. These documents show a deliberate and sustained pattern of financial manipulation. A pattern that left Christine and Janelle struggling to support their children while Mr. Brown diverted family funds into accounts they didn't even know existed. The statement landed like a thunderclap. The jury shifted, pens scratched across notepads, and Kody's lawyer immediately objected, calling the evidence irrelevant. But the judge disagreed. Overruled, she said firmly. Proceed. The first document appeared on the large screen. A bank statement from a shared family account. This is the primary account Christine and Janelle used to pay for household expenses. The attorney explained. Groceries, medical bills, school tuition, everything came out of this account. You'll notice that until 2020, the balance averaged around $48,000. He clicked to the next slide. Then suddenly the balance plummets. Tens of thousands vanish in a matter of weeks. Kody's attorney shifted uncomfortably, but Christine's lawyer was relentless. Where did the money go? Exhibit 58 provides the answer. The next document showed a wire transfer from the family account to an account solely in Kody's name, one Christine and Janelle claimed they never knew existed. The amount, $82,400. The description, personal management fund. This was not a one-time incident. The attorney continued. It happened again and again. The next few slides showed similar transfers. $36,000, $54,000, $91,000. Each time the destination was the same. Private accounts controlled exclusively by Kody. In total, the attorney concluded, over $430,000 was siphoned from shared family funds into accounts that my clients had no access to and no knowledge of. The gallery erupted in shocked murmurs. Christine lowered her eyes, remembering the months she had struggled to cover medical bills for one of the children, while Kody told her he was tight on money. Janelle's jaw clenched. She had taken out a personal loan to keep up with school tuition during one of those very same months. But the financial bombshells weren't over. The attorney pulled up property records next. Specifically, deeds related to the sprawling Coyote Pass land that had been a central part of the family's financial plans. My clients believed that Coyote Pass was a shared investment, he explained. They believed it was a legacy for their children. What they didn't know was that Mr. Brown was quietly shifting ownership percentages and using the land as collateral for private loans. Loans that had nothing to do with the family, and everything to do with his own ventures. The jury's eyes widened as copies of loan documents appeared on the screen, each one bearing Kody's signature. One showed a $250,000 loan, secured against the property, with none of the wives listed as co-signers. Another showed a deed transfer for a parcel of land into an LLC solely under Kody's control. Kody Brown used the family's property as his personal piggy bank. The attorney declared. He told them there was no money, that the family was struggling, while secretly building financial safety nets for himself. Kody's attorney jumped to his feet again. Objection. These financial decisions are irrelevant to the custody matter at hand. But Christine's lawyer was ready. On the contrary, Your Honor, they go directly to Mr. Brown's credibility as a provider and a parent. They show that while he claimed to care about his children's well-being, his actions prioritized his wealth, his independence, and his ego. He put his financial security above their basic needs. The judge nodded. Overruled. The evidence will remain. The final blow came when Christine's attorney presented emails between Kody and a financial advisor. In one, Kody wrote, "Christine's whining about school costs again. I'm not bailing her out. Maybe she'll finally learn to budget." Another email revealed his resentment toward Janelle. "She thinks I owe her something because she raised my kids. I don't owe her a dime." Christine looked physically pained. Hearing those words read aloud, Janelle stared at the table, her face pale and still. The betrayal they had suspected for years was now documented. Time-stamped, undeniable. Then, almost as an afterthought, the attorney revealed one last piece of evidence. A check written to a private matchmaker service just months before the divorce. The amount $14,500. The memo line, "consultation deposit." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Christine's attorney didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. The implication was clear. While his family struggled financially, Kody was quietly investing in a future that didn't include them. By the time the presentation ended, the image of Kody Brown as a loving, responsible father was in tatters. The jury wasn't just hearing about emotional neglect now. They were staring at a pattern of calculated deception and financial betrayal. Kody tried to keep his composure, but his hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the defense table. His lawyer leaned in and whispered frantically, but he barely heard a word. All he could see were the faces of his ex-wives, their expressions not triumphant but hollow, as if this vindication brought them no joy, only sadness that it had come to this. The courtroom recessed for lunch, but no one was talking about sandwiches or schedules. They were talking about the money, about the land, about the betrayal, and about how a man who claimed to be fighting for his children had been secretly fighting only for himself. For Christine and Janelle, this wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about custody. It was about exposing the truth. And now, that truth was laid bare for the entire world to see. The patriarch who once controlled every dollar and every decision was now stripped of his power, his motives exposed for what they truly were. And in that courtroom, Kody Brown was no longer the father figure he once portrayed. He was a man on the brink of losing everything.